So today I've decided to do a video on Phalaenopsis orchids, how to look after them, things like that. So I've had Phalaenopsis orchids on and off for about 10 years now. I've had issues growing them though, because I've often lived in cold flats in Edinburgh, which are notoriously they're not glazed, old heating systems. A few of my flats were down to 8 degrees at night, and we'd been a student, I wasn't able to heat them, so that was the main issue. But now I'm in a nice flat, and it's quite warm, they're doing well again. So one of the main issues with Phalaenopsis orchids, if you're living somewhere far north, is cold, especially if they're on a windowsill, as the cold from the outside can get trapped between the curtain and the window. Although your room might be about 15 degrees, on the windowsill it can get down to maybe 5 degrees. Anything under 10 for a long period of time will really hamper these orchids. So the Phalaenopsis orchids are by far the most popular now. You can easily get them in any supermarket, any shop, any garden centre. They flower really well. They're quite easy to look after. Also a decent price. You can get them quite big, and there's just so many different varieties. I mean, at the moment I've only got two, and they're both pretty similar looking, to be honest. But this gives you a good example of the size difference. So this one is one of your larger hybrid varieties, and this is a smaller hybrid variety. So you can really see the size difference you can get on the orchids. This one's about 4 times the size of flower compared with that. So quite easy to look after. As I said, it has to be somewhere warm, because they are from the tropics. They naturally grow epiphytically, which means they live on the outside of the tree, on trees, not in the soil, and so they need. So in nature, they would have a lot of airflow around the roots, quite a bit of sunshine on it as well, which is why you often find them in see-through pots, because the roots do benefit if they can have some light. As you can see there, they are green, and so they do photosynthesize. So they help. That helps them out if you can keep the pots in the sunshine. Now, what they don't like is direct sunlight. They like bright indirect light. If you think about them in the forest where they grow naturally, they'll be under the canopy, but they're in the tropics, so the light is very intense, but filtered through the trees. So they don't want dark shade and they don't want bright light. But anywhere, like this is a west-facing window, so it just gets the sun for a couple of hours in the evening. So this does very well here. Any west, north, or east-facing window is great in summertime and spring and autumn. In winter time, especially if you're further north, I would recommend putting them on a south-facing window, because it's a little bit dull otherwise. So you'll probably buy them, when you first buy them, they'll be in full flower, similar to this, maybe a bit more flowers than that, and they will keep flowering for hopefully 3 or 4 months, possibly longer. What happens in the wild is they're normally in 2 phases depending on the time of year. They normally have a vegetative growth phase where they grow their leaves, or a floral growth phase when they just grow flowers. In a home environment they can do both at the same time, or switching, but generally in the winter it encourages them to flower more often. In the summer they'll grow leaves. So what will happen is when you buy this from the shop, it'll be full of flowers, should flower for a few months. As it flowers, quite a few of these lower leaves down here will go yellow and die off. Don't worry, this is quite normal, nothing to worry about. The leaves will slowly reduce. Now when it eventually does stop flowering, which can take quite a long time, I've known some of these flowers to flower for 2 years non-stop, have almost no leaves left by the end of it. But what will happen is when this stops flowering, you can encourage a rebloom by cutting it. I've done it on this one. So for example, if this one was to stop flowering, you would cut it down to one of these lower nodes, either this one or this one here, one of the last ones from the bottom. That would encourage it to reflower. I did that one on here. You can see there, very nice example of it, shooting from the side, reflowering. Same happened here. So if you do that, you can encourage it to reflower quite quickly again, which is good. And with the new leaves, they tend to be when they're not flowering, but as I said, can vary quite a lot in a home environment. This one here, you can see a new leaf. They just come out the centre. They're very slow growing. You might not even, if you look at it every day, it's not really noticeable, but they do slowly grow. For example, this one here has grown that one leaf in about 6 months. I think it's still growing slowly. This one here has grown this leaf in about 4 or 5 months, and it's still very slowly growing. So one of the main things with these orchids is you've got the light, you've got the humidity I've already talked there. So you've got the light and the temperature I've already talked about, but the watering is also quite an important issue. Luckily they are very forgiving, you know, partly because of where they come in the wild. They'll be on a tree. It might not rain for a few weeks, or it might rain really heavily so they get soaked. So they are quite tolerant to watering, but they are a bit different to normal plants because they are epiphytic. So you've got fleshy roots. They'll either come in sphagnum moss or they'll come in bark like this. I personally prefer the bark a little bit more, the sphagnum moss. They seem to grow a bit better, although the watering is a bit more tricky. So what I do is I pour water from the top, let it drain through the bottom, give it a shake, and that's it. Just hold it on the tap, preferably slightly warm water because cold water can damage the roots. Let it drain out the bottom, and that's all you do. About once a week probably, maybe every 2 weeks in winter. The way you tell if they need any water is, for example, this one, you can see the roots are very silvery there, quite silvery, so that would need a little bit of water if they've got silvery roots. I'll just check this one. If the roots are bright green, that means they have plenty of water, they don't need any more. So this one also could do with a bit of extra water. But if you see that one there, it's quite green at the bottom. So if all the roots are bright green like that, that basically means it's had enough water. If most of them are going silvery grey like these, that means that you could give it a little bit more water. It's time to water again, basically. So I think that's mostly it for the orchids. Give them a dilute feed, half concentration that you would normally give a plant. Every 2 weeks or so probably you'd give them a feed. Not in winter, you just feed them when they're in the active growth stage. Quite often you'll get roots growing outside of the pot. This isn't an issue, you can just leave them you can cut them off if you really find them unattractive, but they do store quite a lot of their energy in the roots, so I wouldn't recommend cutting any roots off the orchids. Yeah, they're generally hassle free, very easy to look after. One of the easiest, probably one of the best orchids to get started with anyway. That's how you look after them basically. I'll probably show you another interesting feature of the orchids. In here is the landing pad. You might want to call it for the bees to land on. And just underneath there's a little bit of almost like plant super glue. So you can see in my thumb that little flap there. The insect will come under and get caught like that, and that glues it on. And if you look very carefully, out pops a bit of pollen on my thumb. And there you have 2 little pollen sacs. Now next time the bee's flying around, fixed very solidly because it's like very fast acting glue, the bee will come up and it just goes up and underneath. As you can see, it pulls away there, and that's now the pollen sacs gone, and that's how they're pollinated. So that's just an interesting thing that the orchids do. So instead of dusting their pollen, they actually have pollen sacs, and they get super glued to the insects. I thought that might be an interesting thing to say. So that's my orchids, and that's how you look after them. Generally I don't repot. Very occasionally I might, but they don't mind being in confined spaces. And that's that.